Assalamu alaikum, it's your brother Murphy here with an answer video for a question I received on my Tumblr. I hope to do these answers, every once in a while, inshallah, for questions that I feel are pressing or common that a lot of people ask. I get between 20 to 30 questions in my inbox per day about these things, so I'm going to try to sort through them and see which ones are common and try to answer them in videos if I can, inshallah. And then quickly upload them so you guys can get the quickest and easiest answer that you're looking for. And I hope, inshallah, that they help out. And as always, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. The question I got today was kind of alarming, not really because of that it's unbelievable or that it's a question that I don't get often, but it's a serious question, and it has to do with self-harm, hurting oneself, or even thoughts of killing oneself, depression, kind of like self-deprecation, hating oneself to the point of wanting not to live anymore. I think that one thing that people kind of fail to give young people credit for, because a lot of young people seem to have this issue, is that it is very difficult to be a young person in this society. If we even forget about religion altogether, it's just very difficult to be a young person in this society, in any culture, honestly. Across the globe, there's a lot of pressure, academic, social, and then if you're part of a faith group, like if you're Muslim or if you're part of any sort of religion, obviously this blog is geared towards Muslims, but it's geared towards humanity as well. Then there's the pressure of your social faith group, which is, to maintain expectations and whatnot. Some expectations are fair, some are not fair, some are personal, but they become communal, and so that becomes an issue. But generally speaking, there's a lot of stressors. There are a lot of stressors that attack someone's sanity, someone's stability, their emotions, their ability to think clearly and to feel a certain way, to feel happy, because that's really what the goal that we have in this life. As Muslims, we want to worship Allah, but also we find in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, peace be upon him, that there's nothing wrong with feeling happy while you're doing it. In fact, it's part of the Muslim's personality to enjoy this life while they worship Allah in a way that's good for you. So when we look at this question, we zoom out, there's a lot of things that we want to talk about. First and foremost, I think that one of the most dangerous things that anyone can do, especially in the field coming where I'm coming from, which is I want to start, I'm in the middle of studying counseling. I'm going to my grad school, inshallah, to get my degree and whatnot, but I'm in the middle of kind of reading all these books. I got these bookshelves behind me. Is that we find that it's really dangerous for people to overlook or to write off someone who says that they want to hurt themselves or commit suicide. A lot of times people have the reaction of, oh, you just want attention, or you're just fishing for compliments, or any sort of basically condescending reaction to it. But you learn when you read a lot of these cases and you read a lot of these books on how to deal with depression and suicide, that the last thing that a person wants to hear or needs to hear when they come to you with a complaint is that they're just being fake. There's really no reason to say that to someone. And so for this person who asked this question, just to get started on the answer, I'm sorry if anyone ever made you feel this way. I'm sorry if you went to someone for help and they made you feel like you were fishing for compliments or trying to get attention. And I want you to know, and anyone else who has this question or has ever had this question or ever had the thought of hurting themselves or committing suicide, I want you to know that I'm here for you. And that if you need to talk to someone, you can message me, you can email me, we can stay in touch and we can talk things out. And I don't think that you're joking. I don't think that you're just trying to get attention. And I do think that you really are trying to seek assistance and trying to get to a better place. That being said, there are a couple things that I think are important to talk about when we talk about the issue of depression and suicide, or self-harm or self-deprecation, emotionally or physically even. The first thing is that there's kind of this misconception that a lot of people have when they're in down times, whether they're actually clinically depressed or just feeling depressed or feeling sad, is that there's this kind of this misconception that it's an easy process to get out of it. And I think what happens is when someone tries their best to get out of it, let's say they change their social circles, they hang out with different people, or they start changing their habits or their routines, they get really upset that it doesn't instantly flip on like the light switch. But emotions are very difficult. They're very volatile. They're very malleable, but at the same time, it's also difficult to push them from one place to another and keep them there. I think that it's really important for someone to know that it's going to be a process. Whenever you go on a journey like a road trip or something, you always have to pack accordingly. You always have to look on the Google Maps. Definitely not Apple Maps because you don't want to get lost. But Google Maps, you want to look and make sure where you're going, and you kind of want to have an idea of how difficult the journey is going to be. If you drive from where you live to another city that's 500 miles away, you need to know how difficult that journey is going to be so you can mentally prepare your mind. So I want everyone who's ever had these thoughts or is currently having these thoughts or maybe goes in and out of having these thoughts to understand something. That to go from a place of depression, a place of sadness, a place of being unhappy, a dark place, to a place that's better than that, that's the goal eventually. And you will get there. And everyone will get there, inshallah. We can all get there if we try. But the key word is that we have to try. It's difficult. It takes a lot of effort. Now naturally, when things take a lot of effort, we usually try to team up with other people and get things done in groups. And so the first advice I'm going to give anyone who's feeling negative or even suicidal is to ask yourself and reflect on what your social circle is. Who are you hanging around? Are you alone all the time? Loneliness can be man's worst enemy or woman's worst enemy. It can be a person's worst enemy, especially when they're feeling down. And so you want to make sure that you're hanging out with people who reinforce good thoughts, good habits, positive atmospheres. When you hang around sad people, you tend to be sad. You know the phrase misery loves company. And so when people are feeling down on themselves and they look around and they see that all of their friends are also self-deprecating and feeling down on themselves, it kind of creates this culture and this climate of feeling negative. And then when you all separate and you go to your rooms and you hear that deafening silence of negativity in your mind, or I hear it in my mind, then you have to look and see what caused that, right? So first is to look at your social circle, see who you're around, see the influences that you have. That also includes the music that you're listening to. If you're going to listen to sad music, you're going to tend to be sad. If you're going to watch sad movies, you're going to tend to be sad. And so make sure that whatever is being put inside of your heart, inside of your soul, inside of your mind, are things that do not trigger sadness. Speaking of triggering sadness, the second tip, or the second thing that I wanted people to look out for, is I need you to reflect and see when it began. What was the trigger? What was the catalyst? What began these feelings? Have you always felt this way? Some people have felt sad for a very long time. Some people can't remember when it started. But I think that when people can pinpoint a beginning, an inception, so to speak, of when the sadness began, when the depression began, then you can start to see what triggered it. What was the catalyst, right? What's something that kind of makes you feel that way? Some people, when I talked to them or was able to kind of help counsel them through their issues, they found that whenever they came home, they became depressed. And then we, talked a little bit more, and they eventually told me that maybe it was because of the way that their mom treated them, or the way that their dad treated their mom, or the way that their siblings had abandoned their family. So try to pinpoint a point of inception for the sadness. When you started feeling this way, what triggers it? Obviously, when you discover the trigger, or when you can kind of narrow it down to something, the goal is then to avoid that trigger and try to stay away from it as much as possible. The last point that I'll give in this short video, and I'm going to give one more point which kind of explains why this video is so short. The last point that I'll give is to never ever underestimate the power of Allah, of God, in your emotional stability and emotional health. I think that a lot of people tend to rely too much on themselves to solve their problems, and that's kind of a difficult problem because we oftentimes put ourselves in problems, and when you put yourself in a problem, sometimes it's more difficult to get out. For example, if you walk and you end up putting yourself into a hole by falling into it, sometimes you can't get out of the hole by yourself. You need someone else to lift you out. And so if we're going to walk on the journey of life and fall into these holes here and there, and then try to get ourselves out, we're going to expend a lot of energy trying to push ourselves out of the hole, and really we may not even get out. And so it's really important never to underestimate the position and power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your ability to remain emotionally healthy. I think that, and my ability as well, by the way, I think that one thing that I find very powerful in kind of calibrating your emotion, or my emotion, are the stories that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. And I think that people underestimate them because we kind of assume that stories are for children. But if you look at the major movement that Twilight has had on people, you can find that, some of these 40-year-old women are fantasizing about vampires. Stories are definitely not just for children. And in the Quranic sense, in the spiritual sense, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used stories many times. You know, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he encountered a situation in his life, it was actually called the Year of Sadness, where he had two very close family members die, his uncle and his wife, and then he was rejected by his people, then rejected by another people, and he was physically tortured. He witnessed his companions die. It was a very terrible year for him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that point could have revealed any verse, any ayah, and he actually revealed the story of Yusuf. And it's interesting because the Prophet ﷺ is in his most down point, and what does Allah choose to give him as an antidepressant? He gives him a story, and it's the story of Yusuf. And if you read the story of Yusuf, subhanAllah, you find that there's a certain blessing in just reading it, and you find out that this guy, Yusuf alayhi salam, went through difficulty upon difficulty, treachery, backstabbing, false accusation, rumors, society and community was backbiting about him, just all kinds of difficulty. And then eventually at the end he saw the light at the end of the tunnel and everything was rectified. But he had to go through lots of darkness to get there. And so I think realizing what stories can do to help is a very important part of remaining emotionally happy. So try to take advantage of that and use that, and think about that, and realize that even in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in his story, there were times after he received revelation where he wasn't necessarily suicidal, but he definitely wondered if his life was worth going on anymore. He thought that he was going crazy. He didn't know, what these revelations were and where they were coming from, until it was confirmed to his heart that it was from Jibreel alayhi salam. And so it's very important to realize that even the Prophet ﷺ is a human being, as a prophet, the best human being, one who is connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly through Angel Jibreel, and even directly through revelation. He himself had difficult downtimes where he himself even contemplated. He stood at the edge of a cliff one day and contemplated jumping because he wasn't sure whether or not it was worth it to keep going. And a lot of people are afraid to use this narration, but I think it shows the human side of the Prophet ﷺ. The fact that he was a human and he did experience stress, and he turned to Allah to take care of those stresses, and he also turned to his family and friends to help him, his social circles, and he also worked hard to get out of them. So I think it's important to look at those, reflect on those, and move past, inshallah. The last tip I want to give, because this is a very short video, I'm sorry if you feel it's long. The last tip I want to give is that it's very important to seek therapy. I myself am studying, inshallah, to become a licensed professional counselor. We have some people here in the Knoxville community, Dr. Salman Tour, Brother Musab Hussein, who is also studying to become a counselor, inshallah. It's very important for people to come to qualified individuals for therapy. I think the word therapy makes people think that they have to be crazy to get it. And again, whatever the word crazy even means, I think crazy just kind of is a word for different. But anyways, therapy is not just for crazy people. Therapy is for people who need assistance, and really all of us need assistance. The Prophet ﷺ, his companions came to him for therapy. He went to Allah for therapy. He went to Allah for therapy. When he was going through down times, he spoke to Allah for therapy. So everyone needs to have some sort of person they can talk to, especially a person who has been trained and qualified in counseling techniques and how to get people out. So I will recommend, please, if you're considering hurting yourself, or if you're going through a downtime and having suicidal thoughts or inclinations or intentions, or even have attempted it, to just connect with a therapist. I can try my best from here. I'm not a licensed counselor yet. I'm studying to become one, but I can help you out as much as I can. But I really do urge you to find someone in your locale that you can meet with on a regular basis, that you can talk to and try to get things balanced out, inshallah. I hope everything goes well for everyone who is suffering, and I ask Allah to help everyone, inshallah, with their ailments, emotional, physical, spiritual, because we all need it. Jazakumullah khairan. Please keep sending your questions, and I'll try to answer them as much as I can, as best as I can. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.